It's a real pleasure to be here today and to hear from so many folk in a sector that is both adjacent to but deeply interconnected to my world. I'm chief exec of a small independent charity, the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission. We were set up 7 years ago now, in the aftermath of the Brexit vote, by groups of business leaders and NGOs to think about how this sector, the food, farming, countryside, land use sector, responds to the implications of exiting the European Union. But also, very quickly, we morphed into thinking about the other crises that we are all collectively facing: the climate crisis, the nature crisis, the health crisis, and indeed the economic crisis that we're now encountering. We produced our report in 2019, and is this okay for me to use this one? Thank you. So we produced our report in 2019, and our funders, we're funded by independent charities, our funders very generously invited us to stick around and help put our recommendations into practice. So that's quite a rare gift if you're the kind of person like me who has been making recommendations about things for decades and very rarely gets that opportunity. Just by way of opening, I just want to say something which responds perhaps to James's remarks. He was speaking just as I arrived earlier and said, the good news is the world's not ending next year. So that, yes, good, low bar. But I'm afraid to tell you that the challenges that we are facing collectively in the UK and around the world are not getting any better at all. Those of you who follow the workings of the IPCC will have seen the report last week, very under-publicised, but nonetheless really quite shocking in its analysis of the progress we are making collectively around the world to stay below 1.5 degrees of warning. The bad news is we are pretty likely to overshoot. And in overshooting, the band of that overshoot is really, really quite shocking. If we reach 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 degrees of global warming, that will be existential for many countries around the world. The IPCC report focused on the fossil fuel sector, but the agriculture sector, the farming sector, is deeply implicated in those particular challenges. Back in the UK, who's been watching Wild Isles with Lord St. David Attenborough? I mean, it's wonderful, isn't it? It's absolutely wonderful. It's so evocative. I urge you to hunt down that infamous 6th episode that's been produced by the RSPB, WWF, and the National Trust, which talks about the real damage that we're doing in the UK to our natural habitats and biodiversity. We have lost 48% of our farmland bird species in the last 40 years. We've lost 50% of our hedgerows, which are vital habitats, habitat corridors for so many species. Only 14% of England's rivers reach a base ecological standard. We've lost 50% of our earthworms, who are a key indicator of soil health, and it's soil health on which our whole food system relies. So the damage to the natural environment is so serious that some futurists will say that it's that will hasten planetary collapse before the climate crisis does, because this deeply interconnected and interrelated natural web of life, once it reaches its tipping points, we have no clue, really, about what the implications will be for life on Earth. And if that wasn't enough to cheer you, our food system, our current food system in the UK, is contributing to a rapid and costly rise in diet-related ill health. 1 in 7 adults will now die of diet-related disease. chronic illness, type 2 diabetes, and other diet-related illnesses will cost the NHS and the public purse £50 billion over the next 20 years. Many health analysts say that it's the cost of diet-related, avoidable diet-related ill health that is currently squeezing the NHS so much that it can't provide the kinds of services that we need and rely upon. And just one final crisis in the polycrisis of our times. In the UK, inequality is rising. And if you're poor, you are more likely to suffer from environmental impacts, from food-related, diet-related ill health, from poor air quality, from other environmental factors. And of course, if you're poor and sick, you can't work. You can't contribute to the economy. You can't contribute to your community. You rely heavily on the sorts of social and healthcare services that we are now struggling to provide. So that's the cheery start to my remarks today. The good news is that the sector that I work in, food and farming, land use and the countryside, is not just one of the drivers of some of the issues that we're describing here, but has the capacity to solve those problems, to address those issues and to solve those problems. So whilst agriculture is a major source of GHG emissions, it also has the potential to sequester carbon through different land use practices. Changes in farming and in food production also have the potential to re-establish nature, restore biodiversity, to redevelop the habitats that nature relies on so much, and shifting what we manufacture, what we eat, how we eat it, can have dramatic impacts on our own health, our own well-being. Some of the work that we've been doing in the last few months has been looking at the opportunities for investment into helping shift the current state. We've been hearing for some time, as no doubt you have, that there is a wall of investment waiting to crowd into nature-based solutions, to natural capital opportunities. Thus far, it hasn't been doing a great deal in our sector. Where it has been coming in, it is with arguably mixed benefits. So I'm also a farmer in Wales. So I'm Chief Executive of a charity, I'm a farmer in Wales. And where I live in Wales, there is an enormous amount of anxiety as we see private equity and businesses like British Airways buying up Welsh farms in order to offset their own emissions. Now that has huge implications, not just for our confidence that we can have that they're seriously mitigating their own carbon emissions, but it has implications for food security, for food production. It has implications, frankly, in Wales, for our culture. It's in those Welsh farming heartlands that the language resides, and in fact, in your sector, it's those places that people want to come on holiday. It's where people want to visit. And the potential that they will be changed beyond all recognition in order to meet the very narrow needs of other actors in the system is very serious. And at last, Welsh Government is starting to get on top of that. But in thinking about the opportunities where our two sectors elide really quite beautifully and have the potential to be part of the solution, I think I'd pick out two big ones. The first is in how you source your products, how you source your food, how you source the things that go on the plates of your customers in your offers. At the moment, we have a food system that works especially well for big global players, big global agribusinesses, who have, to be candid, been the drivers of the problems and are only slowly waking up to how they can be part of the solutions. But we see in our work all over the country small farmers, community organizations, artisan producers who are really committing themselves to developing and progressing the kinds of food production, kinds of farming systems that are part of the solution, that are developing regenerative farming practices on their landscape and are producing from those regenerative farming practices really high quality, sustainably produced, locally produced, seasonal fruit, veg, meat, dairy, and so on. As a sector, your ability to give real confidence to those who are trying to do the right thing by using your procurement power to give them the market they need for those products is enormous. The other point I want to pick out is in the bigger question of investment choices. I was at a launch last night of the Green Finance Institute, Financing the Farming Transition new paper, which is out today. Last week, Bankers for Net Zero launched their paper on financing sustainable farming. We're launching a paper next week on natural capital markets. There is now more interest than ever in how private equity, how finance can work to do the right thing, who can support those businesses and those enterprises who are part of the solution and not part of the problem. So finding ways into supporting, buying land. I mean, this sounds slightly bonkers, but ownership of land that is then able to do the right thing has become a really critical and immediate issue. So directing your substantial resources to those projects, those activities that are part of the solution would be a really powerful move. And I'm just going to finish quickly with perhaps a response to another comment that was made earlier. What do our customers want? Do people really care about this kind of thing? We hear a lot, usually from the media, that people don't really care about climate change. People really only want cheap food. Nobody wants a nanny state. And these are all nice to have ideas, but they're not really critical and relevant right now while we're facing this global economic challenge. Well, I am very happy to be able to tell you that is not what we hear. One of the things that FFCC does and does very well is engaging directly with citizens all around the country. We're a UK charity. We work with citizens all around the country. And we work with citizens in cities and in the countryside. We work with people who are experiencing poverty, sometimes extreme poverty, are using food banks and other sorts of aid. So we work with the broadest range of citizens, from the poorest to some of the wealthiest landowners in the country. And I'm here to tell you that citizens do care. When you talk to citizens and explain to citizens the challenges that we are collectively facing as a society, what's working and what's not working, what the opportunities for change are, and where the risks are, they will say to us, why isn't government doing more? Why isn't business doing more? And frankly, when we tell them that government often uses the excuse that actually poor people just want cheap food, the poorest people are the most outraged that their poverty is being used as an excuse to shore up a really dysfunctional version of business as usual. And in fact, those of you who are following Wild Isles, adjacent to Wild Isles is the publication of the People's Plan for Nature, a citizen assembly that's been working on nature over the last 3 or 4 months. And I urge you to have a look at the recommendations, because for those of you who are sometimes feeling not as confident as you might that you're doing the right thing, you have the support to do the right thing, that will affirm for you that this is precisely what citizens want us to focus on. They want us to focus on tackling the big global issues, not just for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren. They want governments and they want businesses to do the right thing and to visibly do the right thing. This year, FFCC is going to be embarking on another big program of citizen engagement right around the country, right through to October. And we're going to be asking the question of citizens in 20 citizens' assemblies all around the UK. So what do we really want from food? And in determining the answer to that question, how can we give confidence and courage to governments and to business leaders to act on these critical issues in front of us? Because that is what we all want and that is what we all need.